Hey everybody, thanks for joining me for another Bible drill as we continue to work through the parables that Jesus told. In this particular installment, we want to look at a really important parable that Jesus told, and one that all of us can relate to and to understand the main point that Jesus wants to get across. And that parable is told in Luke the 10th chapter, and it really begins by a lawyer who came up to Jesus and really was trying to test Jesus. Jesus had been doing some teaching about your neighbor and having love for your neighbor, and the lawyer asked Jesus, well, who is my neighbor? He wanted to know exactly who his neighbor was so that he could show love and kindness toward just that person or group of people. And what that does is that gives Jesus the opportunity to tell the parable that we often refer to as the parable of the Good Samaritan. And so let's just kind of work through this parable. Jesus tells it to the lawyer, and let's see what we can learn from it. Jesus talks about that there was a man who was traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho. And do you remember what happened to that man? Yeah, that man is robbed and beaten by thieves. These men who just don't show any kind of concern for him, beat him up and leave him for dead. Now, we're told that while he was lying there on the side of the road, a priest saw him there. And what did the priest do? Yep. The priest saw him, looked at him, saw that he was hurt, but he ended up passing by on the other side. We're told as well that a Levite also saw that man lying there. And this, once again, is a person who serves in the temple and you would think would be a very good person. What did the Levite end up doing for the man? That's right, he did nothing because he passed by on the other side as well. He didn't care for the man. Finally, we're told that a Samaritan saw the man lying there in the ditch. And what did the Samaritan do? The Samaritan did something and felt something that was very different than what the priest or the Levite had. Do you remember what that was? It's an important word. The Samaritan had compassion on that man. The word compassion means to feel with someone. He felt with that man. That man was hurt and he was suffering, and the Samaritan man, his heart felt for him, and he wanted to do something about it. And indeed, he does. Now, we need to understand, first of all, why this is so amazing. Because Jews lived in Israel, and Samaritans lived in Samaria. And do you know how Jews and Samaritans felt about one another? That's right. They didn't get along at all. They often were at odds with each other. Jews hated Samaritans, the Bible said. And that's what makes this amazing. Because the Samaritan actually stops and helps this man, who we kind of believe is probably a Jew. He helps the man anyway. Do you remember in what ways does the Samaritan man help the man that was lying in the ditch? What are some of the things that he did to show his compassion and care for the man? What did he do? All right, he did several things for him. First of all, he got some bandages and wrapped up his wounds to try to help him while he was there on the spot. Then he placed him upon his animal in order to transport him to where he needed to go, which means the Samaritan man would have had to have been walking. Then what does he do? Well, he puts him up in this inn, in a place where he can be kept safe, and he pays for that. He pays for that out of his own pocket. This man is willing to sacrifice in order to help someone else. Now, having told that story, Jesus then asked the lawyer, the one who asked the question in the beginning about, well, who's my neighbor? Jesus then asked him, well, which of those three do you suppose was a neighbor to the man? And you can imagine that the lawyer, kind of almost not really wanting to answer, but he does, he says, well, it's that Samaritan, I suppose. And that was the correct answer. But what Jesus really wants him to understand is this central idea from Luke 10, verse 27, He wants him to know you need to love your neighbor as yourself. And the truth is, our neighbor can be anyone. Sometimes we think of neighbor and we just think it's the person who lives next door or the person who lives on the same street as us. And while that is true, our neighbor is anyone, any person that we come into contact with, all of the people that we meet in this life. We need to love them even as we are loving ourselves, as we take care of ourselves and provide for ourselves. When we are able to help those who are in need and show love and care for them, we need to do that just like this Good Samaritan did. Let's do that. Thanks for tuning in.